You see the impact he had on so many people's lives. Let's bring back in trial attorney and former prosecutor Donald Schweitzer. You know, Donald, let's talk about where the case is now. Right now, it's jury selection. They're giving questionnaires out, trying to get people's thoughts on this and whether or not they can serve as jurors. How difficult is it to get a jury in a case like this where you have such a well-known and in many cases well-loved figure like Michael Jackson?
Depends on which side you're talking about, Ryan. I think for the prosecution, it's pretty easy. I think that Michael Jackson's fame has just risen so much since he's died that people generally love Michael Jackson. And it's going to be hard to find people that don't love or respect his work. And for people to be sympathetic and think that he had contributions to make still and that his life was worth living, that's going to be easy to find. For the defense, on the other hand, I think it would be difficult because of the celebrity status. We've seen here in LA that celebrity status really makes people do things and think differently. And I'd be worried if I were the defense for that. And I don't care if it's here in LA or Arizona or New York. I mean, Michael Jackson is Michael Jackson. You're going to have that same impact.
Do you think the judge handles this case any differently than he would for anybody else because of Michael Jackson's celebrity status?
There may be some special instructions that this judge could give to the jurors that say, look, you know, Michael Jackson's a man or was a man, and you can't take into his celebrity status. But isn't that really just kind of adding to it? I don't think the judge is going to do much in that regard.
You know, one thing that comes up when you think about this case, before the concerts were announced, I'd say in the 5 or 6 or 7 years before, Michael Jackson was living a public life that was really in question by many. There were allegations of drug use, abuse charge cases, things like that. How much do you think that information and his life comes into this case?
I think it's probably going to have to come in. The defense is going to want to show that he was a troubled man, and they get to have some latitude as to why he was troubled. But the judge is not going to allow them to retry the past allegations. That's not going to happen. But some of it will come in. Let's face it, though. All that other stuff is already in. Everybody knows that Michael Jackson was this pop star that everybody loved when he was a kid. That's already in. And his past is there. There isn't a person on this planet that doesn't know who Michael Jackson is and respect his work. So, you know, his past is there.
All right, Donald, you know, as we look forward to this trial, tell me on the prosecution side, what piece of evidence or what witness that you are really focused on seeing or you would really want to see when they're working to prove their case?
I would want all of the people that were around, the security. I would want the police officers that responded, everybody that could substantiate that this doctor was using drugs that he shouldn't have been using. And I would also rely on some expert witnesses to come in and say, look, this guy was just giving him what he wanted. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. Ryan, you're an attorney and I am, and you know that being a professional is not giving your client or your patient what they want. It's actually giving them what they don't want a lot of times. You got to tell them and be blunt, even if it means you get fired. It looks like what he was doing was giving Michael Jackson everything he wanted, and that's what I would bring in is these drugs, and then get some experts to say, look, you know, a proper physician would not have done that.
You know, Donald, let's talk about that because I think you're right. That's a critical part of this case, especially if part of your argument is Michael Jackson was addicted to drugs. He had perhaps a messy personal life. I would think you would want to watch him like a hawk. So let's get into that for a second. How do you, in one sense, say that he was drug addicted, he was seeking these drugs, but on the other hand, tried to explain why Dr. Murray wasn't present and he was giving him these drugs every hour on that last day?
Well, I think that the doctor is going to say that, look, maybe I shouldn't have given them these drugs, but Michael Jackson was taking way more than what I gave him. And when I was giving him the drugs, it was with proper procedure, and there was no chance at all that he would have died. It wasn't but Michael Jackson's own behavior. But you and I know that what he did, just bringing those drugs there, by having them available to him is wrong. And I think that that's the key to this case, is that he was not acting as a professional, he was acting as a drug dealer. He was giving Michael Jackson whatever he wanted because he wanted to maintain Michael Jackson as a client.
So let's flip it on the other side. From the defense perspective, they don't have to prove anything. That's the prosecution's job. But they will have to defend against what the prosecution's case is. Who is the most important witness or the most important piece of evidence that you expect to come from the defense?
Well, anybody who knows that Michael Jackson had a drug problem. I mean, it's pretty apparent that he did, and I'm sure that there's plenty of witnesses that will come in and say, look, he was using this stuff all the time and he was out of control. And I think that, you know, his troubled past, those are the best witnesses for the defense. The defendant himself may make a pretty good witness. He's a doctor, and he could get in front of the jury and explain the procedures and do the doctor speak type of a thing. But in some respects, he's a sitting duck as well because of the fact that he shouldn't have been administering these drugs.
You know, Donald, I think about what Michael Jackson's death has done to his family. His mother, his sisters and brothers have been there through many of the pretrial hearings. They must just be devastated. And then there's the idea that they could actually be testifying in this trial. Do you expect to see them as witnesses?
Yes, and I would expect to see them early on in the trial. A prosecutor's tool is to personify the victim, and they need to put these people out in front so that when the jury starts this case, they see a human being. They see somebody that had a life that was worth living, somebody that had contributions to make, somebody that had a family that's suffering. The prosecution always does that, and they will definitely do that in this case.
And what about the children? He's got 3 children, 1 or possibly 2 of whom were in that room. And we don't like to think about children having to testify in a situation like this because it's so painful for them. But do you think they'll be called?
I think that they could be called because at least one of the children, I think it was, one of the children was a percipient witness. He was there during the time that the doctor was eventually scrambling around looking for some help. So it would be surprising if the prosecution didn't call them. And Ryan, these children were old enough where they could handle a courtroom. In California, the laws are becoming much more liberal in bringing children in to testify. So I would expect to see at least one of them there.
All right. Donald, we can expect possibly to see Michael Jackson's family testifying, his kids, one of whom was there. Donald, quite a trial coming up. Thank you so much. Great to get your insights as always.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, opening